Paris, where by the end of this year we could see British troops being deployed in Ukraine to hold a peace. And it's very important that ceasefire deal is agreed in the right way. So far, though, Putin is not playing ball. That's what the PM has told us. He's not a serious player in the...
British troops in Ukraine? What? British troops in Ukraine? Sounds a lot like World War III to me. And just when we think that maybe the war between Russia and Ukraine is starting to wind down, as you guys know, Trump has been trying to work out a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, but the rest of NATO, they're not having it. Looking at their actions, looking at their behavior, it's obvious that they are desperate. They are desperate for whatever reason. They are desperate to keep this conflict going, folks. Usually people are desperate to stop a war, desperate to stop the senseless, endless violence. That's not the case here. These people are scrambling, they're panicking, they're squirming around, they're doing whatever slimy, wormy, snaky stuff they can do to keep this conflict going, because for whatever reason, they do not want this war to end. And I feel confident saying at this point that regardless if we like it or not, there's going to be a major war with Russia that's going to spill out, into being something bigger than just the conflict that we see between Russia and Ukraine right now. The UK, EU, rest of NATO, whatever you want to call this group of countries, they've decided that they want war. And if the US isn't going to give it to them, they're going to dive in head first themselves and then expect the US to save their behinds in the long run. So for those of you all who don't know, over the past couple of days or couple of weeks, there have been some not so secret meetings between certain countries over in Europe. More specifically, it's France and the UK that are spearheading these meetings. They're the main ones in talks right now, and they have plans to send troops to Ukraine soon, folks. Real soon. Before the ceasefire happens, and it doesn't look like a ceasefire is even going to happen, they're getting ready to send troops as early as this week. Now, they claim they're not going to be there to do any fighting. They're going to be there to do other various things. But they've already stated that if some of these soldiers come under fire, or if something happens to some of these soldiers while they're in Ukraine, and mind you, they say they're not there fighting. I know there's mercenaries on the ground from various countries already fighting. I already know all of that stuff. But they're claiming that they're sending military personnel to help Ukraine with strategies to help deter Russia. They're going to send troops to Ukraine to analyze the situation on the ground and figure out how they can better help Ukraine. But they've stated that if anything happens to these soldiers, then retaliation is on the table. Meaning that if British or French troops are hurt while in Ukraine by Russia, that they have the right to retaliate themselves. Not Ukraine retaliate, but the British Army, UK, France, they'll retaliate themselves, which would mean a direct conflict between those countries and Russia. But that's what they want. It's obvious that that is what they want. They have been pulling little things this entire time to get this conflict to spill over into World War III, so the U.S. gets further involved. They've been trying their hardest, okay? And this is like their last-ditch effort. They're going to send some troops over there, knowing damn good and well that something bad's going to happen, and then they're going to try to retaliate. Now, recently, Zelensky has basically said that he's no longer okay with the ceasefire deal. He's not okay with the mineral deal. He says he does not view the money that we've been giving Ukraine, he does not view it as a loan. He has no intentions on paying the money back. And he has every intention on keeping on fighting. Now, I'm not pro-Russia or anything. I'm pro-common sense and I'm pro-truth. If you look at the deals that they've been trying to work out, it does not make sense for Russia at all. Russia is winning this war. I don't know what you might hear on social media. I don't know what you might see on the mainstream media. Russia is winning. By far. Actually, recently they've been making significant advances. And now all of a sudden the ceasefire talks come in. But this is what they want Russia to do. This ceasefire doesn't mean that they plan on ending the war. No, they want a temporary ceasefire. Because right now, Russia is dominating. Okay? So during this ceasefire, basically they want Russia to stop making their advancements. They want Russia to halt their military activities, okay? Even though Russia is winning, they want Russia to stop. And during the ceasefire, they've already stated that during the ceasefire, the NATO basically plans on pouring all types of money and weapons into Ukraine, replenishing Ukraine, getting Ukraine ready for the next stage of this conflict. But also, NATO plans on sending soldiers into Ukraine to defend certain areas, to defend certain lines, they say, to make sure that Russia doesn't push this far or doesn't push that far without running into us first. So none of this makes sense for Russia. It's a great deal for Ukraine. It makes no sense for Russia. This is how I would compare it. Imagine you're in a street fight. You're winning the fight. You have your opponent on the ground and you're ground and pounding him, punching him in the face. And then he says, wait, stop. Time out. Let's pause this fight real quick so I can get on the phone, I can call my friend, and I can tell him to bring me a baseball bat. Then I'll call my other friend, tell him to bring me some brass knuckles. Then I'll call my other friends and convince them to all gang up and jump you. And now it will be 30 versus 1. And now I got a baseball bat. Now I got brass knuckles. Now I've had a chance to catch my breath. I was winded, I was tired. Now I'm reinvigorated physically. That's basically the equivalent of what they want to happen here. The ceasefire doesn't mean they plan on ending the war. No, they want Russia to stop winning for a moment so Ukraine can catch their breath, replenish their troops, replenish their ammunition, replenish whatever else equipment they have, and so that NATO can start pouring troops into certain regions to assure that Russia doesn't go to those regions without having to basically spark off World War III between Russia and these NATO countries. That's what the deal is. So obviously it's not a good deal for Russia. I don't like Russia, or I don't want to say I don't like Russia. I don't necessarily support Russia in this conflict. I'm not pro-Russia, but at the same time, that's the truth of what's going on here. That's the truth. That's the most simple way I can explain things. But as I was stating, there's plans that are being worked on behind the scenes to start putting troops on the ground. France and UK are at the head of these meetings, and it looks like this is going to happen soon. In fact, Macron was actually speaking about this recently. Let's take a listen, and then I'll be right back with more thoughts.
The next question discussed was that of security guarantees. Once a peace agreement has been signed, how can we ensure that Ukraine remains free, stable, and free of further Russian aggression? In this regard, we shared the view that there is a lack of clarity about the conditions for signing a peace agreement and a lack of clarity on the nature of American day-after commitments. We nonetheless agreed on 3 areas of work: maintaining a sustainable and robust, to maintain a stable and robust peace after the peace agreement has been signed. The first aspect for Ukrainian and European security is a strong, well-equipped Ukrainian army. All meeting participants today agreed on this point. That's why, in very concrete terms, we agreed that the British Prime Minister and myself will task our chiefs of defence to ensure that a Franco-British team should be sent to Ukraine in the next few days to work very closely with our Ukrainian partners. They also agreed to this mechanism in order to prepare the format of the Ukrainian armed forces in the futures, the army, the navy, and the air forces. What format is required in terms of the number of soldiers, and what equipment and hardware is required in order to respond to future Russian aggression and deter any Russian aggression. This will enable us to move forward to a planning phase in order to clarify the contribution of each country that's a member of our coalition, in order to give Ukraine a clear idea of the very precise action plan we want to put in place. The second security guarantee will be the reassurance forces that will be deployed the day after the peace agreements. These reassurance forces were what was proposed by the French and the British, not to keep the peace. I'm responding to what a colleague has said. It's not about monitoring the forces on the contact line. It's not a force that will replace or substitute for the Ukrainian army. It's going to be a force of some of the members present. Not all members have agreed to this. Not all members are capable of doing this. Not all members have the political position to do this, but it will be a force that will be placed in strategic areas agreed with the Ukrainians in order to provide sustainable support in the longer term, reassurance and a deterrent against any potential Russian aggression.
So basically, it's just like I've been telling you guys for years now. Russia is already at war with NATO. We just live in an unserious world where even the most powerful people on our planet play childish-like games. They're not direct. They like to throw stones and then hide their hands. They like to ride on technicalities because that's basically what's happening here. Well, technically, we're not at war with Russia because we haven't sent troops to fight on the front lines. But you're sending billions upon billions of dollars. You're sending missiles. You're sending tanks. You're sending fighter jets. You're sending everything you possibly can. You're slapping sanctions on Russia. You're doing everything in the book and then still want to pretend like you are not an active participant in this battle, in this war. Ladies and gentlemen, what most people do not understand, when you see these announcements that, oh, France is sending 15 fighter jets, and Germany is sending 12 tanks, and the UK is sending a bunch of javelins and air defense systems. When they send this stuff to Ukraine, it doesn't end there. The Ukrainians don't know how to use half of these fighter jets. They don't know how to use half of these tanks, half of these missile systems. No, we have to send our military personnel to train them on how to use these systems, on how to use this equipment. But not just that. We have to send our military experts to help target Russian positions. We have people from the US, UK, all throughout NATO in Ukraine right now that are targeting Russian positions. Maybe they're not on the front lines fighting, maybe they're not in the trenches, but they are behind the scenes using military equipment and technology to help Ukraine and their army be more efficient. Now, what do you call that? If you're Russia, would you still say that you're just at war with Ukraine? When you know that NATO is in Ukraine, giving them billions of dollars every time you turn around, giving them all of the military equipment they need, and not just that, the Ukrainians can't even use most of this equipment by themselves, so NATO has their military personnel on the ground, basically using this equipment for them. Like, hey, here's where you need to target. Here's the Russian position. Now, I don't want to get involved in this war, I brought you the equipment, I gave you billions of dollars, and now I'm telling you where to strike. But we need you to press the button, because technically we're not at war with Russia. That's basically what's going on here. So, I'm tired of pretending like this conflict isn't what it is, because it's much bigger than Ukraine. The Ukrainians are basically being used as cannon fodder to try to weaken Russia. That's what is happening. No one cares about peace and sovereignty of Ukraine. No one gives a damn about any of that, folks. No one cares about the Ukrainian people. And when I say no one, I don't mean you at home. I don't mean me. I'm talking about the people who are involved in this conflict, who are ensuring that millions of more people have to die instead of working out an easy peace deal that should have been worked out weeks ago. These people don't care about peace, sovereignty. They don't care about, Ukrainian land and, Russia took this and took that. They don't care about that. Ukraine is being used as a proxy. Ukraine is being used to try to weaken the Russian war machine. That's what all of this is about. And when Russia is said and done with Ukraine, we'll see what happens next. But right now, it's obvious to me that this new plan that they've come up with, before the ceasefire, because you see, at first they were like, hey, we're going to send peacekeeping forces after the ceasefire to enforce this buffer line to make sure no further conflicts happen. Now they're like, oh no, we need to send people now. Before a ceasefire, before the war ends, we need to go ahead and send people over there now. We need to see what type of equipment Ukraine needs, what troops and stuff. But think about it. Why would you do that when you're working out peace deals? Sending these forces over there to see what Ukraine needs in their war against Russia, that means that you plan on this war continuing. Right? I mean, common sense. It's common sense. And more people in America would be able to see this for what it is if it wasn't for the nonstop propaganda that we're being fed by the mainstream media and even social media influencers as well. Because if you just use your common sense and you just try to place yourself in this position, like obviously you're not Russia fighting Ukraine, but like the examples I told you, wonder if you're in a street fight and they say stop so they can get a bat and call their friends to jump you. Look at it from that type of standpoint to better understand what's going on here and to better form your opinions. Don't listen to me. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to listen to anyone. Form your own opinion. But I assure you that if you keep your eyes open and you don't allow these outside sources to sway your opinion, most likely you'll come to the same conclusion that I'm coming to. But yeah, all of this, we got to send people over there. We got to monitor. We got to make sure that, this doesn't happen. No. What's happening is they very obviously want something bad to happen to some of these troops from the UK or France so then they could react. Or better yet, they could try to get America to react. And I don't put pulling a false flag, beyond them either, because they're very capable of that, and we've seen that happen in the past as well. So we'll see how this plays out, but it's not going to end well. They're going to stretch this out as long as possible until Ukraine simply has not a single fighting man left, or this is going to spill out into a more direct conflict between countries in Europe and Russia. But most of these places in Europe, they're not ready for a conflict with Russia. I'll be honest with you. Europe is the weakest it's ever been in the history of the planet. These countries in Europe are the weakest they've ever been. They really rely on us, the U.S. So if we exit the equation, which we kind of have to a certain extent, it's going to be interested in seeing how they react. As of right now, they're still trying to pour more money in. They're trying to double down. We'll see how long that lasts, though. For now, you guys let me know your thoughts down below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all very soon in the next video.